In today's tutorial, I'm sharing secrets. Secrets to a successful art journal page. This video is full of tips and tricks. You're not going to want to miss it. So let's get started. I'm working on the 7x10 Canson Mixed Media Art Journal. And I've given this a coat of gesso and I put some painter's tape across the top to keep anything out of those coils. I like to work flat, so I take it off the coils. So tip number one, I am going to start by using some collage papers, gel prints, scrapbook papers, what have you. Use what you have and make what you have work for you. So I've got this nice grungy looking gel print that has some of that burgundy in it. And then I grabbed a scrapbook paper that coordinates with it. Flip through what you have, match it up, and then I am simply using what I call the rip-a-strip technique, where I'm just ripping the different collage papers and layering them up on the page. Now, anything pretty much goes here. You can put as much or as little of this as you want. I don't like straight edges, but you could incorporate straight edges if that's the way you roll. And you're going to notice I'm going to set this all up here. And then when I start to glue it down, I've changed the orientation altogether because the possibilities are endless. And remember, this is simply the first layer. And the secret to an art journal page is really you're going to build lots of layers and you need to let go of layer one to let the page develop over time. The benefit of using the collage papers is it's dry. You're not dealing with wet medium. And it starts off your color and your pattern story. So if you're not sure what colors that you want, or you're working and you don't want to have wet paint, this is a way you can start a page very, very simply. And I'm just moving these pages around. Try really, really hard not to overthink at this stage. Having said that, you typically do. You spend a little bit of time moving it this way, moving it that way. When you like what you see, that's when you stop and you move on. So because I'm layering papers here, this is layer number 1 and 2 together. Now, at this point, I do not know what focal image I'm going to use or where this page is going. I'm just going to be open to the process. Now, because these papers are thicker, the burgundy one is actually scrapbook paper, and the other one is copy paper. I'm using gel medium from the Crafter's Workshop. And I'm just layering this up, making a good seal. I want to get some of this gel medium on the top. I want to turn the paper into a non-porous surface because I don't know where I'm going to go. And if I make it into a non-porous surface, if I put something on it later, I can remove it very quickly because it's non-porous. It just stays. Where there's the straight edge right across the top, I just use scissors to cut it off instead of having ripped edges at that end. And I'm loving the play of this scrapbook paper and this gel print. I keep all my gel prints in color coordinated file folders in my hanging file system, like with like, and then you just go and grab what's available. Once that's done, I'm just cleaning the gel medium out of my brush and giving that a dry. I flip it upside down. It's just easier to cut, but you want to make sure that it's completely dry. And that gel medium, it does take a bit of time to dry. So we're ready to put the next layer, and I'm going to add some marks. But instead of stamping marks, I have some marks that I have put onto the excess plies of napkins. I do a lot of art with napkins, and you peel off the excess plies. This is that excess ply. I've done some stamping. I think that was the with cardboard and black paint, and I just have it in my stash. So I don't have to grab out my black paint here. I can just stamp. Now, the benefit of having this pre-stamped is I can put it exactly where I want it. Well, no fear of getting it in the wrong place. The white part of that napkin goes completely translucent. You're not going to see it, but it does show whatever's behind it. So that yellow and the burgundy still shows through. So the marks are on top. So this is the third layer here. And I can add as much or as little. If I get it in the wrong place, it's just really easy to lift it up and move it as you just saw me doing here. If you're putting it on a dark, it doesn't go completely clear, but it's good enough and I can tweak that color if I want. And remember, this is only the third layer. I could take this, I can audition it where I want it and make a decision. No, I really don't like that look, or absolutely, I want to go that way. So having some mark making on tissue papers or excess plies like this really saves time, cleanup, because you can do a stash builder and have a whole bunch of different marks on excess plies and use them wherever you will. So every time you add another layer to your art journal page or mixed media piece, you're basically pushing back what's behind it, altering it. And when I added the black marks, you added some contrast here. You made it kind of started going a little bit grungy and definitely started me down the vintage road. This is a stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and it's very fine. And I struggle with using my makeup sponge and getting the paint to stencil correctly. I get too much and stuff. But I am using this stencil brush from the Crafter's Workshop. This is the first time I'm using it, and I loved how it worked. Now, when you're using a stencil brush, you want to not have a lot of paint on it. This is particularly good for these small openings. This clock has very tiny openings. So I definitely will be using the stencil brush. They come in different sizes. This is the bigger one. Loving that clock. So when I put that clock on it, it definitely is reading vintage now to me. It's starting to shape my idea of where I might go. And I'm thinking while I'm doing this, what focal image do I have in my stash that might work here? I'm also thinking, oh, definitely with the clock, we've got a time theme going there. So maybe a sentiment from my It's About Time sentiment pack. So it starts shaping up. Don't think when you start an art journal page that you absolutely have to know every single thing that you're going to do. You just have to make one decision at a time. And then when you get that one's done, then move on to the next one. I was having so much fun with the stencil brush. I decided I'm going to use this Harlequin pattern in here. I like the smaller scales Harlequin. You can get a slightly bigger one from the Crafter's Workshop, which I have, but I like this size of it. Just moving it over to extend it if it's not giving me enough. Definitely going vintage here. And I'm layering this up. I'm putting it on top of some of my other mark makers. I'm not worried about it. So we had one, two, three, four. This is the fifth layer so far. Now, because I put the clock that way, I'm kind of limited on the orientation in my mind because I don't like the clock going sideways. But if I hadn't glued stenciled in the hands of it, that would have just been, it would have been just marks, not anything precise. I'm cleaning this brush. I think it's going to be important to take the time, clean the brush. So I'm getting out any excess paint. And then I'm going to use my Murphy's Oil soap mixture. This is water, Murphy's Oil soap, a couple glugs, and a couple squirts of dish soap. And I'm just cleaning, getting all that acrylic paint out of it, and then drying it. It cleaned really nicely and is ready to use again. So when I started going vintage, I remembered that I had printed this off. I believe this came from supercoloring.com. Great coloring book sites are a great source of printables that you can use on your art journal pages. You can typically take them and blow them up to the size that you want, which is what I've done here. I'm cutting off the excess. I'm not sure this is going to fit, and I'm just kind of auditioning it on here and making a decision. Do I like it? Do I not? Is it going to fit? Is it too big? I think it works. So off camera, I finished cutting that out. A little bit more color to this, and I grab my Naples yellow, and of course I get it all over myself because, well, I'm a messy crafter. Hands up if that's you too. And here I'm just using my fingers with some Naples yellow. That's the color that's in there. I'm just adding more color to the background. I'm thinking that maybe I'm going to leave my focal image white. So I want it more color in the background. So that's what I'm applying. I'm applying Naples yellow with some white gesso on my finger and just applying it. And again, you're still seeing those marks and everything that was there before, but it has been pushed back. And I think this is the sixth layer. And I'm going over top of some of the Ripa strips, the collage papers that were the first and second layer. This softens it, melds it together. And if you get paint where you don't want it, you can grab a baby wipe or a wet cloth and wipe it back, reapply as you deem necessary. Even those clocks are getting pushed a little bit further back. There's a hint of them, but not in your face. Because the only thing that's going to be the focal image is the girl, that she's going to be the focal image. I'm trying to decide if I want leave any white space or not. And again, I'm just deciding as I go. Put on, put off. It's a bit of a dance. You're just deciding what looks good to you. And that's all that matters. Then I decide I'm going to do some white stenciling with that Harlequin pattern. Now, here's a mistake. I take the white paint on it and I'm stenciling, but because there was black paint on there, it came off and I got this gray grunginess there. So I kind of leave it and thinking, okay, well, that's not so bad. And then I start doing the white properly. I clean my stencil brush a little bit more, clean the stencil, and I'm liking that look. I like using the same stencil or same mark maker with two different colors. I really like what that adds to a page. It just seems to be more cohesive somehow. And I'm loving the stencil brush. That's a win. I'll definitely be using those more. Now, I was going to put white paint over top, and I thought, I'm going to take a baby wipe. I'm going to wipe this back, get rid of that ugliness that was a oops, and put another coat of paint on. So you can always fix your mistakes. Don't dread it. Once that's dry, I grab my stencil brush and I do it in white the way I initially wanted it to be. Because I'm using several components of this one stencil, you know they're all going to work. I thought about doing the script, but I thought, I think I've got enough going on. Enough layers, enough pattern. Here I'm just making it darker so that the white stenciling shows up a little bit more. Thinking I'm pretty much done my background. 7, 8 layers. Now I want to make my focal image stand out. So I'm going to do a trick here. I have a lot of lids that I save, and I'm going to trace a couple partial circles on here to showcase or add weight to the focal image. Add some interest to the background, separate the background, add another layer to the background and stuff. So save those lids, different sizes for different ones. They make perfect templates. I'm thinking I might want to put one up there, but not sure. Now, what I'm tracing the circle with is an Inktense pencil. Now, you can buy a set of Inktense pencils. I like the blocks for my mixed media art journals better than the pencils, but I have the pencils and they're great for doing this. Now, Inktense is ink and it's permanent once it's completely activated. So it's not going to move again or smudge if I put wet medium on it, which I like. That's why I like using acrylic paint. That's why I like using the Inktense pencils. But did you know that you can buy Inktense pencils one by one in art stores, or I've even seen that online. So if you only want a black one or a navy one or a couple dark colors to do some shading and do things like this, you can just buy single pencils. So and then I'm just activating it. I've got water on my angle brush and I'm activating it. I love that smudged look. It goes really well with the vintage feel that I'm going with here. So instead of shading with acrylic paint, I just grab my Inktense pencil and I'm shading along and edging the page the same way. Just to show you that there are many ways of doing the same thing. Use what you have. If all you have is acrylic paint, you're going to shade the other way using the floating acrylic technique. If you have a Stabilo all pencil, you can use it, but then you're going to have to remember that Stabilo all pencils will reactivate with wet medium. Inktense pencils do not reactivate or are less likely to activate, but you got to make sure that you completely activate them and dry them. So you just have to know the properties of whatever you're using. I could use charcoal pencil. Charcoal goes really good with vintage too, but that's reactivating. And I don't want to have to worry about reactivating stuff. I like things to be super simple. But if that's what you have, that's what you use. And you can add more and increase it as you go. So I really like it with just the two circles. And then I decide to move the girl over kind of in between both of those two circles, which wasn't where my brain was going. But again, the page kind of leads the way and determines. So here I'm using fluid matte medium to glue them down because it's just thin copy paper. Now, wherever I have that Inktense block, I'm being a little careful because if it smudges, if it reactivates, if I haven't totally reactivated it or activated it, it may reactivate, and it a little bit did there. You just need to be mindful that that could happen and then clean off your brush as you go, if necessary. So I want to seal this paper. I've decided now that I am going to not leave it white, although you could leave it white. And then I look through my sentiment pack. It's about time. And I grab this quote, if not now, then when? Ties in with the clock that's peeking in the background. ties in the lettering, the font that was used for this ties in with that vintage Old English style. So everything worked together. And I'm putting one in one of the half circles and one and part of it in the other half circle. Now I'm sealing the paper because I am planning to overpaint this printable. And I don't want raw paper. I'm going to keep my brush in here in case I need it to glue something else. Decide, I'm going to grab my distress crayons. I knew I had this burgundy one. So I'm just scribbling some on the craft mat there and activating it with a little bit of water and painting it on. And as this goes, you're going to see me, I'm going to put it directly on that paper. I'm going to use the paintbrush a little bit. I'm going to build up color. I start, it's pretty light, then I can add more and more. Now, I'm using my distress crayons here because I have them, right? Use what you have in your stash. I so rarely use these in backgrounds because, well, distress crayons, they do reactivate with wet medium later on. So it needs to be a top layer. And I prefer using these in smaller sections. So for colorizing, a printable works really, really well. Using the brush, I can get into the little nooks and crannies, working with my fingers as well. I can do kind of a little bit of both. And I do love the burgundy color of this. If you've got scribble sticks or you've got other similar type crayons, use them. But I do recommend sealing the paper with either a coat of white clear gesso or a coat of fluid matte medium or matte medium like I did. Now I'm picking up the little bit of burgundy that's in the background and bringing that into the dress. If I had gone with the golden color, that would have not really worked so well. It would have, been too much of that one color. But the burgundy, there's just hints of it in the background, and I'm just, working this out. I decide I need another color here, so I grab the navy blue in the distress crayon, and I think that looks not too bad. Here I'm just scribbling it on and then activating it with the brush. Easy peasy. You could have introduced green, you could have done another color, but I try not to have too many colors. I want everything to work together. There is a little bit of blue in that one gel print way back at the first layer. That one gel print had a little bit of blue, so there is some blue in the background, but ever so slight amount. I thought of stenciling with blue on there and said, no, I think there's enough. We've got enough going on. I put a little bit of the pink and the flower in the hair, and I put some blue up top. You can use acrylic paint and overpaint it, but I recommend thinning the acrylic paint if that's what you're going to do. Then I grab some craft paint and I'm just painting the skin, whatever color. You can mix the colors, get a skin tone that you like by mixing paints if you want, or just do it easy peasy and get a craft paint in various skin tones and use that. Lasts forever. Using brown acrylic paint for her hair. I don't have a brown distress crayon. Now I've grabbed my Inktense pencil, this is black, and I'm outlining my focal image and then activating it to shade around the girl. Now, distress crayons will reactivate if you put water on them and pressure. So I'm trying to avoid getting any wet medium on the dress of this girl because it can reactivate, especially if I put pressure, but it's a little more forgiving than other water soluble, watercolor or different things like that. I'm just adding some dark lines in there and just finishing, outlining my sentiment very rustically. I'm not even reactivating this. I like that rough look to it. And then a splatter of gold. I just thin my gold paint and splatter with my fan brush, my favorite brush to splatter with. So I hope you found all the tips and tricks and my secrets helpful, and you can use them on your art journal page. Here's my finished page. There are some close-ups coming up. Until next time, go get creative.